Thank you. At this time, the state calls Michael Luco. Stand before the clerk, who's standing up there, and be sworn.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony given in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Have a seat over here at the witness stand.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
Michael Luco, Michael-Lewko.
Where do you live, sir?
405,
Let me be more specific. What city do you live in?
La Crosse.
Okay. How long have you lived in La Crosse?
Since 2004.
Are you from Wisconsin before that?
Yep.
Mr. Luco, in your life, have you ever had a drug problem?
Yes.
What's your drug?
Heroin and meth.
How long were you a user?
5 years.
Are you clean and sober now?
Yes.
How long have you been clean and sober?
A little over 2 years.
Are you employed?
Yes.
Where do you work?
That's industrial metal.
How long have you had that job?
About 16 months.
Did I hear you right, 16 months?
Yep.
Okay. Mr. Luco, do you know someone who goes by the name Cush?
Yes.
How long have you known him?
15 years.
Would you consider Cush a friend?
Yes.
Have you always known him to be a person living in the La Crosse area?
Yes.
Sir, do you see Cush in the courtroom today?
Yes.
Can you let us know where he's seated and what he's wearing?
He's seated over there in defense, blue shirt.
I'd ask that the record reflect in-court identification of the defendant.
He's identifying person with blue shirt over on the defense table. Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Luco, I'd like to direct your attention to July 28th and early August of 2021. At that time, did you find yourself in the La Crosse County Jail?
Yes.
Have you ever been convicted of a crime?
Yes.
How many times?
10.
Now, August of 2021, July of 2021, Those were what I refer to as the COVID times. Do you remember that being a thing at the jail?
Yes.
When you went to the jail, was there an admission and quarantine process?
Yes.
If you can you just explain to us how that worked?
So you get booked in downstairs in the jail, and then they put you in quarantine up to 7 days in a quarantine block, single cell.
Quarantine block, single cell.
Yep.
Do you remember the name of the quarantine block?
See?
The letter C?
Yep.
Before you got to C block, did you spend a couple of days or just a couple of hours or minutes downstairs that you first told us about?
Yes. You can, up to 3 days.
Okay. Up to 3 days in downstairs in sort of the basement. Am I understanding that right?
Yep. In the
Okay.
booking, yeah.
And then go upstairs to C block, which is quarantine, 7 days there.
Yes.
Okay. Now you said single cell.
Yes.
Was that, were there, in a single cell, was that just all walls, door, no window, or could you see out of that room?
You could stay out of the room.
How so?
Through the door window.
Through the door window?
Yep.
If you can kind of describe for us, was it a big window or a little window or about how big?
It's always 4 inches by maybe roughly 2 feet tall. So it's like a big rectangle.
Okay. Did you spend 24 hours a day in that cell, or were you ever out of that cell?
23 hours in the cell, an hour out.
Okay. During that hour out, where could you go?
And you could take a shower, read, use the phone, use the kiosk.
During that time, well, first of all, during the 23 hours in the cell, did you ever have the opportunity to speak with other inmates?
Yes.
Can you tell me how that worked?
You can talk to them through their door, like the window, as long as you don't get caught. Or you can yell back and forth through them.
Okay. Would there be, so you've got a window on your door. Did that look out to a hallway? Did that look directly to another cell or something else?
And it looked directly out into the cell block area.
Okay. And then during the hour out, could you speak with other inmates?
Yes.
Okay. Now, during your 7 days in the C block, did you end up speaking to Cush?
Yes.
Cush was also in C block?
Yes.
Now, I want to talk about that. You spoke to him. How were you able to speak with him?
During the hour out or yelling through the vents.
Did you have a hard time hearing him?
Yes.
Did you do anything to remedy that, to be able to hear him better, ask him to speak up, anything else?
Get closer to the air duct vent.
And when you would ask him to do that, would he do that?
I'm sure he would.
Why do you say, I'm sure he would?
Just so we can hear each other better.
Okay. When you would speak with Cush, if you remember, who approached who? Did he come and say, hey, Michael, how are you doing? Did you say to him, hey, Cush, how are you doing? Who approached who?
I approached him.
Why'd you do that?
Because he was brought up during the day, and then I seen him in there. Since I knew him, I approached him to see how he was.
You said you'd known him for how long by that point?
15 years?
15 years then?
Yep.
It's been 3 years, so 18 years now. Am I doing that math right?
Yep.
Okay. When you spoke with Cush, how did he seem emotionally to you? Did he seem calm, regular, normal Cush, or something different?
No. Distraught, scared, worried.
Did he tell you what he was distraught, scared, worried about?
Yes.
What was that?
They got him for, in there for a homicide.
Now, at this point when you spoke, well, actually, we'll get to that in a moment. At this point when you spoke with Cush and he told you that they got him for homicide, had you heard about 3 young men being killed at a quarry?
Yes.
How had you heard about that?
Before I was incarcerated in the jail, it was said and people were called.
People were called?
Yeah, like throughout our friends, people were called and said, you know, these people were killed and
Did you know the people that were killed?
yes,
Did you, I take it then you knew Nemo Yang?
yes,
You knew Peng Lor?
yes,
And you knew Trevor Maloney?
yes,
You heard things through phone calls with your group of friends that you had in common with those young men?
yes,
Had you read anything?
no,
Had you seen any documents about it?
no,
Did you read any newspaper articles?
no,
Do you know a woman by the name of Bridget Schlicht?
yes,
By the time you spoke with Cush at the La Crosse County Jail, had you spoken to Bridget Schlicht about the deaths of Nemo Yang, Peng Lor, and Trevor Maloney?
no,
Did you speak at all with Bridget Schlicht while you were in the jail in August of 2021?
no,
Okay. So I'd like to go back to your conversations with Cush at the jail. Did Cush say whether or not he was involved in the deaths?
yes,
He said, did he tell you how he was involved?
yes,
How was he involved as he said it to you?
as the gunman,
Was that the word he used?
no,
Okay. Did Cush tell you who he was with at the quarry?
yes,
Who did he say he was with?
black,
Anybody else?
Bridget,
Is that what he called her?
yes,
Did Cush say anything about what Black did?
yes,
What did he say Black did?
drove the car down, put the people in there and handed him the gun.
Did he say whether or not Black used the gun to do anything violent?
Yes,
What was that?
hit Trevor Maloney in the mouth.
Did Cush say anything about Bridget?
I brought up Bridget, so yes,
You brought up Bridget.
yes,
For the first time or after he brought up Bridget?
for the first time.
Okay. What, if anything, did he say about Bridget? Did he say if Bridget was shot or was not shot?
Was not shot.
Did he say anything about any feeling he had about Bridget not being shot?
There wasn't enough bullets to kill her.
When he said, well, when he said anything about that, did he admit any kind of sadness or regret?
No.
Now, you just mentioned something about, he brought up not enough bullets. Do you remember speaking with Investigator Fritz Leinfelder about what Cush said to you?
Yes.
Do you remember telling Mr. Leinfelder anything about not enough bullets?
Yes.
Your recollection is that you did tell Mr. Leinfelder about that
Yes.
back in August of 2021.
Yes.
Since August of 2021, have you discussed these deaths with multiple people?
No.
Have you read or heard anything since then?
I've heard things.
Okay. As you sit there today, can you tell us whether not enough bullets was something you heard from Cush or something you've heard since then, or you don't know?
From Cush.
In August of 2021, were you using pretty heavily?
Yes.
Did Cush say anything about not being happy that he let Bridget live?
No.
Okay. Did Cush tell you anything about having images of what happened in his head still?
Yeah.
What was that?
That he couldn't get the images out of his head
What were those images?
of shooting the 3 men.
Did he tell you what order he shot them in?
Yes.
What was that?
Nemo, Peng, and Trevor.
Did Cush tell you where he shot the 3 men?
Yes.
Where was that?
In the back of the head.
Did Cush tell you anything about how the men were positioned when he shot them in the back of the head?
Yes.
How was that?
On their knees.
After he shot them, did Cush tell you where he went?
Yes.
What did he say about that?
He left to go to Wausau.
Did he say whether or not Bridget left?
Yes.
What did he say about that?
He took off.
Did Cush tell you how many times each young man was shot in the back of the head?
Once in the back of the head, and then 3 to 4 other shots.
Now, at this time, when you were in the Crosse County Jail, did you also see a man did you also see Black at the jail?
Yes.
Had you met Black previously?
Yes.
Were you in C Block when you saw Black?
No.
Where were you?
I got transferred out of quarantine to E Block.
You saw Black, did you see Black before or after you spoke with Cush?
After.
Did you talk to Black about the shooting?
I mentioned it to him.
You mentioned it to him?
Yep.
Did he talk to you about it?
No.
Did he say anything to you about it?
No.
Mr. Luco, before you were in the Crosse County Jail, before the shooting, a few days before that, had you had the opportunity to see Cush at a house?
Yes.
When you saw Cush at a house, did he tell you anything that he was doing at that time?
Yes.
What was he doing?
Looking for Nemo.
Did he tell you why he was looking for Nemo?
No.
When he told you he was looking for Nemo, did he show you anything?
Yes.
What did he show you?
A gun, a 40.
A gun?
Glock 40, yes.
A Glock 40?
Yes.
How do you know it was a Glock 40?
It says so right on the barrel.
You could see that?
Yes.
Where was the gun?
In his waistband.
Was anyone with him when this happened at the house?
There's a bunch of people at the house.
There were a bunch of people at the house. Was
Yes.
Black at the house?
Yes.
How did Cush refer to Black?
As his brother.
What was your impression of Black?
And he's quiet.
Mr. Luco, back in mid-August of 2021, did you talk to, well, we already established, you talked to Investigator Leinfelder about these statements Cush made to you.
Yes.
Who started that conversation? Did you approach Mr. Leinfelder or did he approach you?
I approached him.
You approached him?
Yep.
Did he come to the jail to get you?
Yes.
And that was after you made it known you wanted to speak to him?
Yes.
How'd that make you feel to be speaking to Investigator Leinfelder about this?
I'm scared.
Why?
Because I don't want to be labeled as a snitch or anything like that.
What made you overcome that and speak with him?
And I was just, it just needed to be done.
Mr. Luco, after you spoke with Investigator Leinfelder, did you get any cases dropped?
No.
Did you get any charges dropped?
No.
Did they release you out of jail and say, thank you so much, you can be on your way now?
No.
Did you get any money?
No.
Did you get any kind of reward?
No.
Anybody give you a medal, shake your hand, and say, Michael, you've done the best job ever?
No.
Have you gotten anything out of speaking with Investigator Leinfelder about this other than a subpoena saying you have to come to court?
No.
Mr. Luco, right now, as you sit there today, are you getting any benefit to this at all whatsoever?
No.
How does it make you feel to be here?
I'm scared. Still.
Mr. Luco, how does it make you feel to be testifying against someone you've known for about 18 years that you consider a friend?
Scared.
Thank you. I have nothing further, Judge.
Crosse?
Morning.
Morning.
You've been in and out of the jail for 20 years.
Yes.
You told the jury you've been convicted of 10 crimes, correct?
Yes.
Probably don't even remember all of those, do you?
No.
In fact, you got a little sticky on your hand with the number 10 to bring up there so that you could remember what that number was, right?
Yes.
Imagine those 20 years in and out of the jail. A lot of stuff was going on in your life,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
As you said, you were an addict during those times.
Yes.
making bad choices during those times?
Yes,
Committing crimes during those times?
yes,
Getting arrested during those times?
yes,
Going into the jail during those times?
yes,
You, as a veteran of the jail, fair to say you've learned how to survive in the jail?
yes,
Your experience in 2021 was much different than your first experience 20 years or so before, right?
yes,
And that's because you'd gained knowledge, right?
yes,
And you gain that knowledge through your experience of how the jail works, right?
yes,
Not just how the jail works between you and the jailers, but how the jail works between the prisoners, correct?
yes,
Because that's a whole different world, correct?
yes,
And unless you've lived there and been there, you don't really know about it, right?
right,
But you've lived there, correct?
yes,
You've been there, right?
yes,
So you know about it, correct?
yes,
You know how things work in the jail, right?
yes,
And there's, out here, there's currency, right? There's money that we use to exchange for different things, right? When you're out in the real world, correct?
yes,
Fair to say that in jail, you don't have dollar bills, agreed?
right,
You don't have tangible money, agreed?
yes,
There's a different currency that goes on in the jail, is that right?
yes, and,
Yeah, you exchange things, what has value in the jail is information, right?
yes,
You can use information to get things, agreed?
agreed,
Right? That's the currency within the jail is, I've got something, you can give it to somebody else and you can get something in return, correct?
yes,
And somewhat like the currency that you use out on the street, when you're exchanging information, that's transactional, right?
yes,
You give something to get something, right? That's how you survive in the jail.
yes,
And because that survival in the jail, you got to get along with everybody else, right?
yes,
And certainly within the jail, there are some people who have more power than other people in the jail amongst the prisoners, right?
sometimes,
Yeah, there might be you've heard the term alpha before?
yes,
Might be an alpha male in your block, correct?
yes,
And that's a whole nother world within the jail when there's an alpha male in the block, right?
yes,
Sometimes when everybody gets along, that's one world, but if there's an alpha male and they're dominating, that's a different world, right?
yes,
And I don't know you, Mr. Luco. You strike me as somebody who's kind of a go along, get along kind of guy. Fair to say?
yes,
Fair to say when you get into a cell block with a group of other people, you're not the alpha male, right?
no,
You're just somebody that's trying to get through that experience, right?
yes,
And I imagine sometimes when you're in that jail trying to get through that experience, you might do things that are different than if you're out on the street, right?
yes,
Because it's survival mode in there, correct?
yes,
And I would imagine within the jail, in that cell block, trust is difficult to establish between you and the other prisoners, right?
yes,
You're not just going to trust somebody else, correct?
right,
Trust has to be, well, you're reluctant to give it, I bet, right?
yes,
You're skeptical of others, I would imagine, right?
yes,
But there's some times where you just got to do what you got to do to get through that experience, right?
right,
And I imagine there's sometimes when you've been in the jail in and out for 20 years where you know that in order to establish trust, you need to go first, right? You might need to just give somebody something without getting something back immediately in the hopes that you might get a favor later. That happens, correct?
sometimes,
Yeah. You've seen other people do that, certainly, correct?
correct,
And you've certainly done that yourself, correct?
possibly,
It's an adaptive survival technique that you've used. Like, I know that person might want a favor from that person, so I'm going to do something for them up front, correct?
yes,
Might be an investment that you make, right?
yes,
Might be an investment in your safety.
yes,
Might be an investment in your well-being.
yes,
Might be an investment in your opportunities for future.
Yes.
Now, want to go back and talk to you more about information, okay?
Okay.
As you said, in the jail, information is the currency, correct?
Yes.
And there's different ways that prisoners can obtain information, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you could, as you've said, you could follow the case on the news. That's a way to learn about cases, correct?
Right.
That's a way to learn about people, correct?
Yes.
Watching the news, correct?
Yes.
Or reading the newspapers, right?
We hardly get a paper.
Okay. Hardly, but you do sometimes get access to papers in there, correct?
Yep, seldomly.
But it all depends, right?
Yeah.
Another way that you could get information is, well, let me back up a second. You've been arrested, charged with crime, and convicted of crime, so I want to ask you a little bit about that process of being a defendant, okay?
Yeah.
Part of that process is you receive a copy of a criminal complaint, correct?
Right.
And when you receive a copy of a criminal complaint, that's a piece of paper, 8.5 by 11, where everything's written out, correct?
Yes.
And then on that piece of paper, it lists what you're charged with, right?
Right.
And then also in the criminal complaint, there's a section called probable cause, and under that, there's a whole bunch of alleged facts, is that right?
Yes.
So when you get a criminal complaint as a defendant, you get to read what the state's story is about why they think you're guilty, right?
Briefly.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's all written down on those pages, correct?
Yes.
And depending upon what the charge is, I'm guessing some of your criminal complaints were short and some of your criminal complaints were longer, correct?
Correct.
Depends on how complicated or the case is. Agreed?
Agreed.
And the more complicated it is, the more information might be written on that piece of paper, correct?
Right.
And so in every one of your cases, even when you're in jail, you get a copy of that criminal complaint, correct?
Yes.
And sometimes, I'm sure when you're in jail, you've seen other people's criminal complaints, right?
Sometimes, yes.
Sometimes those things get out and they float around, correct?
Yes.
You, I would imagine, being a veteran, know, I don't want to get that criminal complaint floating around, do you?
It doesn't bother me.
It doesn't bother you?
No.
But you agree that if that criminal complaint is floating around, there's other people in the jail cell that you may not trust that now have information about you and your case, correct?
Yeah.
And a clever person might be able to use that to their advantage. Correct?
I don't know how.
Okay, well, we'll get to that, all right? Another way to obtain, also in these, so we have the criminal complaint. You've heard the term discovery as well?
Yes.
And discovery is essentially a stack of papers, which includes all the police reports, any transcripts, any evidence that the state has that they put on a piece of paper and they write it all down. That's in a packet called discovery, is that right?
Yes.
And you get that when you're in jail sometimes, right?
I personally have not got one.
Okay. You've always asked your attorney to just like, don't give that to me in jail, right?
Yes.
Because you don't want it in jail because there's risks if that much information about you and your case gets into the jail, right?
It's not how I see it.
Okay. There might just be other practical reasons where you don't want it.
Yeah.
You've certainly heard in your times in and out of the jail, you've heard advice from others in the jail to say, don't let that stuff float around in here, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, you've heard that said before, correct?
Correct.
And that the reason that you've heard that said is because you know and others know that that could be used against you, right?
Yes.
Because as we know, sometimes there's people in jail that you shouldn't trust, right?
Yes.
Right? It's like the rest of the world outside. Maybe some people you can trust, but there's definitely some people you can't trust, correct?
Correct.
And I would imagine you're a lot more reluctant to trust people when you're in that setting with those people who are, like you, locked up because they've been accused of a crime, correct?
Yes.
Another way to obtain information about a person or a case is other prisoners, correct?
Yes.
Just like you said when you were on the outside, you had a phone and you were talking to your friend group, correct?
Yes.
And your friend group was talking about a case, correct?
Yes.
That's not unusual amongst your friend group that they'd be talking about things in your world, correct?
Right.
And in your world at that time, that was heroin and meth, correct?
Correct.
And so, you know that happens on the outside where you can learn stuff about people from what others say, right?
Yes.
It's the same thing in the jail, correct?
Yes.
And I would imagine it's probably even more so in the jail because there's not as much going on in the jail, correct?
Right.
There's not as many ways to entertain yourself in the jail, correct?
Right.
So a lot of times you'll hear other prisoners talk about other prisoners, correct?
Sometimes.
Yeah, it's a big rumor mill, so to speak, right?
Yes.
And everybody starts talking about perhaps somebody else's case, right?
Yes.
That can happen sometimes, correct?
Yes.
Might be a nice distraction to talk about somebody else's wrongdoing rather than your own, correct?
Yes.
So sometimes the most serious cases are the ones that get talked about, correct?
It depends.
They get talked about more because that might make you or somebody else in your position feel better about your wrongdoing when you're like, yeah, but at least I didn't do that,
Yes.
correct? And so those are the cases you talk about, right?
Yes.
Other prisoners talk about them, correct?
Yes.
And those other prisoners have the ability to gain that information in the ways that we talked about through a criminal complaint, through rumors, through the news, through other things, correct?
Yes.
Now, you had said you had some concerns, you used the word snitch. Do you remember you used that word?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
And you said you were reluctant to talk because you didn't want to be thought of as a snitch,
Yes.
correct? And the reason, I want to get into that a little bit, but in general, part of that is because you were concerned, when you're in jail, your bodily security, your person, it's a little more at risk than you are out on the street, correct?
Yes.
Things can happen to you in the jail by other prisoners, correct?
Correct.
You're in a closed, confined setting with a lot of stressful people, and sometimes bad things happen, right?
Yes.
And so when you said, I don't want to be a snitch, it's because you're basically like, I don't want to get beat up in jail, right?
Or outside.
Yeah, or outside, correct? But certainly within jail, sometimes violence is done by one prisoner to another prisoner.
Yes.
And that's something that would concern you in that scenario, correct?
Yes.
And sometimes it happens because someone's a snitch, they're disloyal, right?
Yes.
Sometimes it might happen for other reasons too, correct?
Yes.
An alpha male might just want to come in and dominate, correct?
Yes.
Or an alpha male might want to make sure that everybody in here is doing favors for him, correct?
Yes.
That sometimes happens, right?
Sometimes.
And I want to go back and talk to you about a snitch, okay? You are aware of the fact that there's two possibilities. Sometimes a snitch could be telling the truth. Sometimes a snitch could be lying, right?
Yes.
That happens, correct?
Yes.
You're certainly aware when people are in jail, sometimes they may be motivated by things other than the truth, right?
Possibly.
Yeah. Sounds like there's times when you've been in the jail that your motivation was to protect yourself, correct?
Yes.
Above all, everything else, I'm sure that's goal number one, protect myself, correct?
Yes.
And that would trump anything else in your life when you're inside that jail, right?
Yes.
And I would imagine that probably is pretty common. There's others that sometimes hold that same protect myself value over everything else, correct?
Yes.
And so you're certainly aware when that value is held up that high, there might be times when somebody would get information from one source and lie and attribute it to another source in order to help themselves, right?
They could.
Not only they could, you know that that happens, correct?
Possibly.
Yeah, not possibly. You've been in and out of that jail for 20 years. You know that happens, correct?
Yeah. It could, yes.
Yeah, you're aware of it actually happening, right?
I am not aware, no.
Yeah, not against you, but certainly against other people, correct?
Possibly.
So you certainly know that sometimes, you would agree, prisoners lie, correct?
Yes.
When do you lie?
It's a hard question. It's a hard question. Just when I'm worried or scared of a consequence.
Okay? You talked lightly, so I just want to make sure. Worried, scared of a consequence?
Yeah,
And that fear sometimes, I would imagine, the greatest fear that any of us have is fear of physical harm to our own being, correct?
yes,
Right? Those are the times when you've lied, is to protect not just your identity, but your body.
yes.
Now, I want to get to the time in July, August of 2021, okay?
Yeah.
At that point, again, you're in Crosse County Jail again, right?
Yes,
I would imagine that was frustrating to find yourself there, correct?
yes,
Not a spot you wanted to be, correct?
yes and no.
Okay. Yes, in the sense that it might force you to find sobriety,
Yes,
because sometimes that addiction is outside of your control, right?
yes,
So there are times when you might appreciate the fact that you can now get clean because you're forced to get clean, correct?
yes,
And I would imagine the beginning of that process is extremely difficult on your body,
yes,
painful.
yes,
And there might be things that you need help from others when you're going through that process, right?
as in,
Comfort, water, a little extra food, somebody to look out for you while you're down and sick and out and vulnerable, those types of things.
yeah,
Okay. And you're certainly at the time, I would imagine, oh, how old are you, sir?
36,
What's that?
36,
36?
yep,
So when you were in jail in 2021, you're 33-ish?
yes,
Okay. Now, I appreciate that you're not an old man like me, but I imagine that being in jail at 33 is a different experience than your first time in jail in your teens, right?
yes,
And you're perhaps thinking to yourself, I'm too old for this.
yep,
Your body's just not cut out for it the way that it maybe was in the teens and the 20s, right?
correct,
You can't handle it in the same way, right?
yes,
Also, you're just not as fit, right?
right,
You're not as strong, right?
yes,
You're not as capable of protecting yourself on your own when you're 33 as opposed to maybe in your early 20s. Agreed?
no,
You were a pretty strong guy back then?
yeah,
Okay. But you certainly agree that within the jail there's, in the cell blocks, there's a pecking order, correct?
yes,
You've heard the term hierarchy before?
yes,
Okay. And there's a hierarchy in the jail, right?
there could be,
So I want to just get through some of the timeline here in August of 2021, okay?
okay,
I want to make sure I establish it. I'm going to just start on August 1st, okay? August 1st, you're in quarantine in C block, correct?
I believe so,
Okay. And you're then in a cell by yourself for 23 hours, correct?
yes,
You're not out in the area chatting with everybody else, correct?
correct,
And at some point when you're in this lockdown cell, Nya Thao shows up in a different lockdown cell, correct?
yes,
And you were there first, right?
yes,
When you get out of the lockdown cell in August, you then said you went to E block, is that right?
after quarantine, yes,
After quarantine was E block, right?
yes,
And E block, you're no longer locked into a cell, agreed?
correct,
There's cells that you have, correct?
yes,
And there's cells that other people have, correct?
yes,
But there's a common area in the middle that you can all go in, correct?
yes,
You certainly have access to other human beings in a way that you didn't before, correct?
Yes,
You get to socialize with them, correct?
yes,
You get to talk to them, correct?
yes,
You get to, that's a benefit, agreed?
yes,
But you're also now maybe more vulnerable. If there's an alpha male in that world, you now can't just lock yourself into that cell, right?
yes,
Right? And so you get into E-Block after quarantine, right?
yes.
And in E-Block is a man named Cam Ratnasak, correct?
Not at first.
He comes into E-Block, right?
Yes,
You meet him in E-Block before you talk to Fritz Leinfelder, right?
yes,
You meet him in E-Block before you talk to Ben in mental health, right?
I talked to Ben in C block too.
Okay. So you, at some point in E-Block, you have contact with Cam Ratnasak, who you know as Black, correct?
Yes,
Right. And certainly within that time in there, you had an opportunity to talk to Black, right?
yes,
And in fact, you told the prosecutor that you did talk to Black, correct? Yes?
yes,
And going back to how one might get information about a case, it might, I would imagine Black is sitting there, he's charged with crimes, correct?
yes,
He might have a copy of his criminal complaint, correct?
possibly, yes,
And another way that you could gain information that you've talked about is a person involved might tell you, correct?
yes,
Right? And so if Black was involved and you guys were in the E-Block where you had an opportunity to socialize, Black could have talked to you about what he knew from seeing or doing himself, correct?
he could have,
He could have, right? That opportunity was there, correct?
yeah,
He certainly had a greater opportunity to give you that information than somebody who was in lockdown, had to talk through a vent, correct?
yes,
You had a lot more chances to do that, right?
right,
You had a lot more chances to hear that, correct?
correct,
When you're in E-Block and you're talking with other people, you're not having to yell through the vents, are you?
no,
You just talk to another human being like you might out on the street, right?
correct,
You come up to them and you just have a conversation, correct?
correct,
But it also allows you to have perhaps a closer conversation where one could whisper to another person, right?
possibly,
A more confidential setting, correct?
yes,
Because as you said, when you're over here in this space, you can talk to somebody through that window as long as you don't get caught. That's what you said, right?
yes,
Because it's against the rules when you're in quarantine to go up to the window and talk to somebody else, right?
I don't believe so,
Well, you were worried about getting caught,
yeah,
and I would imagine you, like the rest of us, when you worry about getting caught, because you know you're breaking a rule and you don't want that consequence to come upon you, right?
right,
Yeah. So you didn't want to get caught talking to people through the window, correct?
yes,
And you know, basically in all of those cell blocks, there's video cameras all over, right?
yes,
And the jailers are watching you on that video camera, correct?
sometimes yes,
And they're even recording all of that, correct?
yes,
Because sometimes if violence is done upon one prisoner to another prisoner, they want to have a recording of that, correct?
correct,
So same thing in C block. If you're in C block and you're talking up to somebody through the window, that would something that could be recorded, correct?
yes,
And then there'd be a consequence for you, correct?
yes,
So that's that 1 hour you said that you had during the day to go and do that, correct?
yes,
But you would agree you can't just go and stand and talk to somebody for an hour at that window, right?
you could,
Unless you got caught,
yeah,
somebody saw you on video,
yes,
right? And there would be a consequence, correct?
yes, they would tell you to back away from their window,
You're smart enough to know you don't want to get caught doing that, so that's not what you did, correct?
right,
You didn't stand there and talk to anybody for an hour at that window. Agreed?
not an hour, no,
What you said is that, I believe you told this to Mr. Leinfelder, is you yelled through a gate, correct?
yeah,
When you were talking with Nya Thao, which you later told after you had been in E-Block on August 13th, when you spoke with Mr. Leinfelder, you told him then that you heard what Nya was saying because he was yelling through a gate, correct?
correct,
All right? I think today you called it a vent, correct?
Yes.
All right, so that's the time in which you say this person told you of these horrible acts that you say he claims he did, correct?
Yes.
He's yelling them through the cell block, correct?
Through the door?
Through the door, okay. And was it just you and him that was in the cell block?
No.
There's lots of other people in that cell block, right?
There was one other person?
Okay, and in fact, you gave that one other person's name to Mr. Leinfelder, right?
Yes.
And I'm going to get to that, but he asked for that name, correct?
Who
He
did?
asked for that name to tell you who else was there to hear this, correct?
Yes.
And that's when you told him that name, correct?
Yes.
Because one of the things that you guys were talking about is he wanted to know, can I corroborate what it is you're saying? That's what Mr. Leinfelder wanted to know from you, correct?
Possibly.
Right? I mean, not possibly. He like literally told you that. Like, I need to corroborate this because there might be reasons why you'd be lying.
Yes.
That's what he told you, correct?
Yes.
And so you gave him this other prisoner's name, correct?
Yes.
You're not here to say whether that prisoner was able to corroborate anything you said, right?
No,
You don't know, correct?
I don't.
We'll just figure out by the end of the trial whether he can come here and corroborate what you had to say, right?
Objection, relevance, argument.
I believe it's argumentative, I agree there. Sustain on that basis, try to, go ahead.
So, August 1st, we talked about, then you come August, I think it's 5th, you get into E block, around there. Sound about right?
Possibly, yes.
And then it's sometime after that on August 13th, when you speak with Mr. Leinfelder, this man right here, correct?
Yes.
In between the time that you got to E block until you spoke with the police, you met with a private investigator, correct?
Yes.
And the private investigator that you met with was employed by Cam Ratnasak, correct?
Yes.
That's Black, correct?
Yes.
The man who's in cell block E with you has a private investigator come and talk to you, correct?
Tried to talk to me, yes.
Yeah. And what you know, because you know when people come in and out of E block, correct? Everybody knows if someone's in E block and they get taken out, there's kind of like, hey, where did Michael go? Why did Michael go away? Or where'd Billy go? Or where'd Dave go? There's talk about that, correct?
There could be.
Yeah. And so how many people are in a block?
Anywhere up to 20, I think.
Okay. So if people are coming and going, the others are talking about it, right?
Could be.
Yep. And you're one of those people that was taken out of that block to go talk to Cam Ratnasak's private investigator, correct?
Yes.
What you know is Cam didn't just, Cam's private investigator didn't just talk randomly to every person in E block, correct?
Correct.
Correct? You were one of the chosen ones that that investigator decided to talk to, correct?
Tried to talk to.
Yeah. And so you would agree that there would need to be a reason why that investigator for Cam Ratnasak would come and pick you to speak with you, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and that reason might be that Cam told his lawyer or the investigator, go talk to Michael Luco, correct?
Objection calls for speculation.
Not speculation, I'm asking if he's got knowledge that that would be a reason.
A reason why somebody else might do something.
Yeah, sustain.
When you met with the investigator told you, you learned, Cam told me you might have something that will help his case, right?
Objection hearsay.
Sustain.
You had a conversation with Cam's private investigator, correct?
No.
You didn't?
No.
All right? You met with Mr. Leinfelder after you met with the private investigator, correct?
I met with Mr. Leinfelder.
Yes. You also met with a private investigator, correct?
Yep.
And you told Mr. Leinfelder that you met with a private investigator, correct?
Yes.
That's on the recording that you have of the call of the conversation you have with Mr. Leinfelder, right?
Yes.
You know that everything you talked to Mr. Leinfelder about is recorded, do you not?
Yes.
Okay. And what you told him is, I met with a private investigator, correct?
Yes, and I did not talk to them.
Okay. You didn't tell that to Mr. Leinfelder, did you? You said I met with a private investigator,
Yep.
right?
Yes.
after you met with that private investigator, you went back to E Block.
Yes,
And when you went back to E Block, Cam Ratnasak, also known as Black, was there in E Block, correct?
yes,
I would imagine Cam Ratnasak, he's the alpha in that block, correct?
no,
He's just a quiet guy,
yes,
mellow,
yes,
chill.
yes,
That's what you're here to tell the jury about. He's just a chill, mellow, quiet guy.
yes,
So when you came back into the cell block to talk to Black, he didn't pull you aside and say, "What'd you tell my investigator?"
no,
He didn't pull you aside to say, "Did you tell her what we talked about?"
no,
That didn't happen.
no,
If Cam Ratnasak was the alpha in that cell block, and if he's a violent man, under that hypothetical, you would have reason to do that person favors. Agreed?
Objection, foundation, speculation.
Hypothetical, I can ask people
You can
hypothetical.
ask a hypothetical. This is a hypothetical. Go ahead.
It is. Under that scenario, you would have a reason to do that violent alpha male in your cell block a favor, right?
no,
You wouldn't.
no,
You wouldn't be worried about your personal security.
no,
Not at all.
no,
You certainly agree that, as you said before, you'll lie to protect yourself, right?
yes,
And sometimes the protection that you're looking to protect yourself or advance yourself isn't from the government, but it might be from another prisoner, right?
it could be.
Now, I want to talk about August 13th, when you met. You met with, can you just point out who you met with on August 13th? What's he wearing?
A suit?
A tie or no tie?
No tie.
He's the only male at this table?
Yes,
That's the person that you met with to talk to about what you said you heard, correct?
him and another guy, yes.
And during that first conversation with you, one of the things that he asked you about is, have you had any contact with Black since you've been in jail, right?
Yeah,
He asked you that, correct?
yes,
And we know, because you've said so today under oath, that the answer is yes, correct? And we know the truthful answer is he's in that cell block, you talked to him, right?
yes,
But what you told him was, we don't really talk, correct?
correct.
That was a lie, correct?
No,
Just different from what you said today.
no,
And when you said that to Mr. Leinfelder asked a lot of follow-up questions of you, correct?
yeah, he asked a lot of questions.
You spoke with police before, correct?
No,
In general, in your time in and out of the jail and being charged with crimes, you've spoken with law enforcement. We can agree on that, sir?
yeah,
Okay. And you know that there are some times when you make statements to law enforcement officer that a law enforcement officer gives you the impression that they're skeptical of what you say, correct?
I mean, they're always skeptical.
They're always looking for corroboration, correct?
Yes,
Right? And there were certainly times in corroboration is when they're like, look, do I need to just take your word for it, or is there somebody else that can like corroborate, verify what you're saying, right?
yes,
That happens a lot in your world, correct?
no,
In the jail world that you used to be involved in back in 2021 and before, right?
it could be yes.
Because in that world, you weren't somebody to be trusted necessarily. The police wanted to corroborate what you said, right?
Yes,
Okay. And so he kept asking you, like, I think one of the things he actually even said, did you just get all this from Black to bolster Black's story? He asked you that question, right?
He did,
He was critical of that, correct?
correct.
And that's when you said, no, I mentioned something to mental health, right?
Yes.
And then he asked, when did you talk to people in mental health, right? You had a conversation about that.
Yes,
And you even told him about a person's name in mental health, Ben, correct?
correct.
And then what Mr. Leinfelder told you is, I'm going to want to corroborate what it is you say you told Ben in mental health. He was asking you about that, correct?
Correct.
Because what you told Mr. Leinfelder is that you'd previously told Ben from mental health, I'm in with Nya Thao, and Nya Thao confessed to me. That's what you told Leinfelder, you told Ben. Are you tracking that?
No,
Okay. On August 13th, you met with Mr. Leinfelder, right?
right,
And he was looking for corroboration and you told him about Ben, correct?
correct,
And then he asked you, what'd you tell Ben, correct?
correct.
And you're basically, I told Ben the same thing that I told you, meaning Mr. Leinfelder, right?
No,
What did you tell Mr. Leinfelder that you told Ben?
that I am in here with the guy that did the homicides.
Okay. What you told Mr. Leinfelder is that you told Ben, I told them, you know, they got me locked in here with a friend of mine who admitted to it.
Correct,
That's what you told Leinfelder that you told Ben, correct?
correct,
And then what Mr. Leinfelder, you met with Mr. Leinfelder again on August 14th, correct? The next day. You met with him twice.
yes,
And on the 13th, on that first day, he's like, I'm going to need to go chat with Ben, correct?
correct,
And part of that is do I have your permission to go talk with Ben? Because these are your private conversations with somebody who's providing you with mental health counseling, right?
correct,
And you gave him that permission to go do that, correct?
yes,
And then Mr. Leinfelder left, correct?
yes,
When he left on that day, on the 13th, he had two different potential sources to corroborate your story, correct?
yes.
One is this inmate that you talked about. What's his name?
Kane,
Kane?
yes,
And two is Ben from mental health, correct? And then three would be, you didn't mention it, but the potential for video evidence showing you at the window where he could have talked, right?
yes,
Those are three different ways that he could have corroborated your story,
yes,
because he was seeking to do that.
yes,
And he came back then on the 14th and spoke with you, and that was again recorded, correct?
yes.
And one of the first things he said to you, right out of the gate, do you have any idea the seriousness of filing a false police report in a triple homicide case? That's what he told you, correct?
Yes,
Certainly skeptical of what you had told him before, correct?
yes,
He wanted to impart upon you the seriousness of what it is you were claiming, correct?
yes,
And another thing that he shared with you is sometimes things have a tendency to come out in the end where somebody is trying to help themselves and get a little consideration. He was telling you about that, correct?
yes,
And he was talking about what, if any, consideration he or the government could give you, correct?
possibly,
But you're aware that there might be other benefits other than just help from the government. Sometimes there's a benefit because you get help from a prisoner inside the cell, right?
no,
And when he confronted you and questioned your statements, you told him, I'm scared as hell, correct?
yeah,
And when you said, I'm scared as hell, that was a time in your life where you were in the same cell block as Black, correct?
yeah,
And then he tells you, you know, I went and talked to Ben, right?
yes,
He told you that, correct?
yep,
And he told you, Ben takes pretty good notes, correct?
yep,
And he told you, Ben didn't corroborate what you said, right?
Right.
Your Honor, I'm going to object as to hearsay. I'm going to move to strike.
A, he's already answered. B, it goes to his mindset.
If it's not being offered for the truth, well, I'll take that back. A, overruled, just go ahead, because this is about the interaction between Mr. Leinfelder and the witness. Go ahead.
And have you looked at those notes?
Yes,
You shared those notes with the state, correct?
are you referring to the packet that you have in front of you?
No, I was talking about Ben's notes. Sorry if I confused you. You haven't looked at Ben's notes, have you?
No.
Right. The only person you know that looked at Ben's notes is Mr. Leinfelder, correct?
Yes,
And you don't know whether the state would be obligated to give me Ben's notes, correct?
I have no idea.
Your Honor, I'm going to object.
Sustain.
And when he told you that Ben doesn't corroborate what you say, he gave you another chance to say, you really want to go forward with this, correct?
Yes,
That's when you said, I'm scared, right?
no,
Because after you had that conversation with Mr. Leinfelder for the second time, you had to go back into the cell with Black, correct?
yeah,
And since that time, you've been released, correct?
yes,
You're a free man right now, correct?
yes,
But as you said, you're still afraid, correct?
yes,
And you're still afraid of Black, correct?
no,
You certainly were told about the potential for your being charged with perjury, correct?
yes,
And you're certainly aware that if you say something to the police, even if it's not under oath, you could be charged with a crime like obstructing, correct?
correct,
Mr. Leinfeld made that super clear to you when he spoke with you on the 21st, correct?
correct,
And then you followed this case in the news, correct?
no,
You haven't followed the case in the news?
no,
This is your first time testifying in this case, correct?
yes,
You weren't called in the first trial.
Objection, relevant.
Sustain.
Have you testified under oath about what you just said today? before?
Same objection.
Sustain.
I imagine did you follow the Mr. Tao's case in the news?
no,
Not at all.
no,
You didn't know anything else about this until you got a subpoena for this trial in 2024.
correct,
So you wouldn't be able to tell us about the feeling of relief that you had when you learned you didn't have to testify before.
Objection, relevance.
Sustain.
You agree that you're a different person now, right?
yes,
You've gotten sober, correct?
yes,
And the person you are today might be a lot different than the person who talked to Mr. Leinfelder in 2021, right?
no,
Same person?
yeah,
Same person willing to lie to protect themselves?
not lie,
To do things to protect yourself, correct? Same motivations.
no,
You would agree that that's a possible motive for somebody in your position to say something wrong would be to protect themselves, right?
right,
That's all.
Redirect.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Luco, you were asked questions, lot of questions about things you said to Investigator Leinfelder and all of those conversations. One I'd like to start with. Mr. Nelson read you a question that Investigator Leinfelder asked you. I'm going to read it to you again. He asked you, and things like this have a tendency to come out in the end when somebody's trying to help themselves out and get themselves a little consideration. I just want to make sure you fully, do you remember him saying that to you?
yes,
What was your answer?
I don't remember,
Do you recall telling him, I don't need no help, no nothing?
yes,
You were asked questions about being scared as hell.
yes,
You said that in 2021,
yes,
and I think you referred to yourself now as being scared.
yes,
Are you scared of black?
No.
What are you scared of?
Snitching?
On that topic, when you're in the jail, what's the quickest way to make yourself a target?
Snitching?
Is snitching a way to survive in the jail?
No.
Why is that?
Makes your time difficult.
How does it make your time difficult?
You become a target of other inmates.
A target in what way?
Violence.
Is snitching a form of currency among inmates?
No.
What's worth a lot in the jail?
Canteen?
Canteen like ramen noodles,
Yeah.
honey buns?
Yes.
You're asked about legal documents, criminal complaints, and discovery. Those are lawyer words. Are those necessarily jail inmate words?
No.
Did Chris show you a criminal complaint?
No.
Did Cam Ratnasak show you a criminal complaint?
No.
Did Cam Ratnasak show you discovery?
No.
Did you sit down at a table, spread out paperwork, hunker down with Mr. Ratnasak and get to work trying to figure things out?
No, he didn't talk about his case.
Okay, the name Kane Moss came up. Kane Moss was around when you were in C Block, I believe.
Yes.
Do you have any control over what Kane Moss says or does?
No.
Thank you. Kane Moss, I believe, is Cainmoss. Do you know Kane Moss to be a snitch?
No.
No, you don't know, or no, he's not?
No, I don't know.
Okay. Certainly being a snitch makes somebody a target, though.
Yes.
Likewise with Ben from mental health. Now, let me just be clear. Ben is a person who works in mental health at the jail.
Yes.
Is he a counselor of sorts?
No.
No? What does he do there?
Yeah, it's basically just talk to you and give you medication.
Thank you. Do you have any control over Ben?
No.
As you recall, what did you tell Ben about this whole situation?
That they had me in here with the guy who did the homicides.
And was that when you were in C Block or E Block?
See?
C as in Charlie?
Yes.
Judge, could we approach?
Okay.
That's the end of my questions. I have nothing further on redirect.
Come on.
were asked some questions about being a snitch in jail, making you a target. I want to follow up on that, okay?
Okay,
Obviously, the jail's a big place, correct?
correct.
There's times when it gets smaller and smaller, depending upon where you are in the jail, right?
What do you mean?
Like when you're in E block, you're not worried about the people in A, B, C, D block, the other blocks, correct?
You could be, yes.
When you're in E block, it's all about E block, correct?
Yes,
And as we talked about before, when you're in a block, sometimes there's one dominant figure, correct?
correct.
And so there certainly could be scenarios in which doing a favor for the dominant figure, even if it's snitching, that might not get you in trouble in that block. That might help you in that block. Agreed?
No,
No.
no,
Doing favors for the dominant alpha male in a block that helps that person manipulate the system, that wouldn't do a prisoner a favor?
no,
That wouldn't help the prisoner with their personal safety?
no, because you're in there with other prisoners.
Sure. And there's a hierarchy, right?
Yeah,
And sometimes one person can dominate everybody else
they could,
through sheer will and/or violence,
if need to be.
or threats of violence, correct?
Yeah,
And in that scenario, it might be a good idea for a prisoner to do a favor for that one person, right?
yes.
That's all.
Any redirect?
No, Judge, thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir. You may step down. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a break this morning. You can go ahead, yeah. We'll take a break this morning. We're going to come back about 15 after. We do have to talk about something. We'll, might take a little bit longer, but my hope is about quarter after. We'll bring you back. Thank you.